Hello everyone, good morning. I am Samiksha Kataria. I am the community manager at Comlead Consulting. Today we have the pleasure of hosting a special guest who is an expert in the field of immigration. So the founder of a non-profit to help immigrants in crisis situations. She's also the host of 2 podcasts, author of multiple books, and she's an avid speaker. All of those who are here, you can always start putting in your questions for her. I know we are all lost in rule books. We have a lot of questions about OPT, CPT, same with me. So let's ask all our questions to her. And we'll be sharing a link for me.ps, which was also already shared. You can put in your questions there. You can also add in your questions in the chat. And we will be monitoring those, and I will be asking them on your behalf. We are trying to not ask too specific questions because we want to respect everyone's time. So I guess that's it. And let's get started. Tahmina, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, all of you, for having me today and organizing this event. It's one of my favorite things to do is to really speak about immigration to those who are thinking about changing the world and really just trying to figure out how to make it into the United States. And it all really starts with students. And so I'm very, very grateful and honored to be here with you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the options that you might be considering as you come to graduation, what happens after you graduate, and what kind of visas you might be looking at. And one of the superpowers I have is to talk about startups and immigration. And on that front, I have a new book coming out on July 4th. I'll talk about that later. But a lot of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you will be in the book in a little bit more detail. But given that you are all students here, because I speak to all different types of audiences, I wanted to focus on the things that will be very important to you. So my name is Tahmina Watson, as you've heard. My law firm is Watson Immigration Law in downtown Seattle. I've been practicing since 2006, and I have helped people at every stage of their immigration journey. The most common time people come to me when they're on F1s is when they're transitioning into an H-1B visa. But the way I see you guys is in that sort of, gray period when you're coming out of graduation and you're waiting to get your H-1B. And is there anything else other than an H-1B that you should consider? So let's talk about just you as students on student visas. What can you do, what you cannot do? You all may know this, but as an F1 student, you are able to work 20 hours on campus only during the time you're a student. I actually, for the book, I was looking at some of the regulations, and the regulations do say that you can work off campus, but in very limited circumstances. And, if that is something that you need to think about, it is something that you should talk to your designated student officer about. As I'm talking, I think I would love for you or one or two of you to maybe volunteer and say, hey, I'd like to read that chapter on student visas, just to, give me some feedback on what I have not addressed. But it's imperative that you never break any of the rules of immigration, because once you do that, you become unlawfully present, and that can have many ramifications on your future. So F1, while you're studying 20 hours a week, you can work full-time during the vacation periods, but that's it. Now, many of you will know, actually, all of you will have a 12-month OPT period. And if I were in the room with you, I'd say, hands up, who knows about OPT? I'm sure all of you do know about it. It's optional practical training. Anybody who graduates will get 12 months of OPT. During that time, you have to work in, you can work anywhere, but it must be related to your industry. So if I am, studying for medicine, it would be, really left field to work as a lawyer. So it has to be related to your subject matter. You have to work at least 20 hours a week. And when it's the 12-month OPT period, you don't necessarily have to get paid. And this becomes very important for startup founders. I would love to, if people are here and if you're able to just, stick up that little raise your hand, I would actually love to have a gauge of how many people are interested in startup and entrepreneurial issues, because that will help me understand where you all are. So use that, is that reaction button?
Yeah.
Or, you can use that to just say, interested in startups for myself, or involved in a startup. That will help me understand where you are in this journey. But in this 12-month period, you don't have to be paid, but you also need to be working. A lot of times people will say to me, well, I haven't been able to find a job. You can be unemployed for 90 days, but that's it. And now all of these, some of the questions that I get around these, well, who's going to know? When you are transitioning into another visa category, particularly the coming out of OPT, Immigration Services will want to know that you have maintained status. How do you maintain status? The maintaining status comes from making sure that you don't break the rules. And each visa will have its own rules. Now, in the OPT period, when you're trying to maintain status, the government will want to see that you have got pay stubs. Now, I mentioned to you that you don't have to get paid. In that situation, you need letters from your employers to say that, I have worked, and here is my information, and I can prove it. I wasn't going to mention CPT too much, but one of the things that is important is at each level of education, whether it's a bachelor's degree or master's degree, when you have your OPT, you can only have a maximum of 12 months. So sometimes there is people will do pre-completion OPT, and there is post-completion OPT. All of that can be 12 months only. There was a time, and some of you may or may not have heard this, but during the Trump administration, just before memos came out, for some of my clients who are working on CPT, which is curricular practical training, which you can do side by side as studying. And just one caveat: I don't deep dive into the CPTs, OPTs as much. I'm doing that because I'm writing the book. But typically, I rely on the designated student officer, because the designated student officer is your best friend in guiding you in what you can and cannot do. So make sure that you know who your designated student officer is. Make sure that they are your best friend. And every time you take a step, ask for their guidance. But from my perspective as a practitioner, I kept seeing requests from the government in these H-1B applications say, show me during your CPT, you were working or attending your school, show me your pay stubs, show me that the money had arrived in your bank account. What I didn't realize is that one of the things they were looking at, amongst others, was that how long were people working on those CPTs? Was it beyond 12 months? Before the Trump administration came and was really scrutinizing these timelines, there were times where people worked more than 12 months on their CPT. And suddenly those were causing grave, serious problems. So the takeaway from this is 12 months, that's all you get at each level. Now, for entrepreneurs, if you are going to start your own company, that is a time where you could do it, because you're allowed to work and you'll have work permission, and you don't necessarily have the funds to pay yourself, but you can work. So if that is you, that is something to explore, you can reach out to me. Now, then comes the 24-month STEM OPT. The STEM OPT is for people who have science, technology, engineering, and math degree. And I believe the program that you guys are in is STEM qualified. Is that correct? And that, right? And so that means you have a huge leg up compared to other people, because not only do you get 12 months, you get 24 months as well on this OPT. And now the 24-month STEM OPT program has some restrictions. The number one restriction is, you have to be in your field. you can't, be working as a lawyer if your major subject is medicine. It has to be related. The second thing is that your employer must be enrolled in E-Verify. And E-Verify is when the employer as a company has signed up with the Immigration Services E-Verify program, where they will say, this employee is joining us. We want to make sure that this person is legally able to work in this country. Now, a lot of established companies in the United States are not necessarily enrolled in E-Verify, because when you enroll in E-Verify, and they may do it just for you, but if they do it for you, they have to do it for everybody. And it's a systematic burden sometimes, and the penalties can be very high for employers. So not all employers will sign up for E-Verify. So when you are in your 12-month period and you're thinking ahead about your 24-month period, don't wait until you're close to the 24 months. Look way ahead, because you might be having fun and learning a lot of things with your current employer, but if they are not enrolled in E-Verify, they cannot continue to employ you. And I have spoken to many employers who will, come to me with the employee saying, we are doing this. What are the pros and cons? What are my obligations? And I have to say, at least 50% of those established companies have their own system. They don't want to add something else. And so for you, your takeaway from this is, I have 24 months. Who are the employers that can hire me? Look at that already, and maybe you strategically work with them in your 12-month period as well. So you get a sustainable amount of work experience that benefits everybody. And if they love you, they may apply for an H-1B visa. I ask students in your situation to create timelines for yourself. You'll graduate June 2023. Your 12 months will be over June 2024. Your 24 months will be over June 2026. Now you need an H-1B visa. But if you're at an employer who is E-Verified, enrolled in the E-Verify program, what happens is they could put you in the H-1B lottery as soon as possible. They don't have to wait, but you don't have to move away if they're not, in the E-Verify program. Now, the lottery, I'm going to talk about the H-1B in just a moment. There's a lot to say about it. But for you, creating your own timeline is going to be crucial, because you may not win the H-1B lottery first time round. You have to figure out what your other options are. And this timeline it helps you plan all the things you need to do in advance, so that you can not be anxious, not be stressed, and you're prepared to deal with whatever circumstances you will face. Now, coming back to the OPT 24 months period, not only does the employer need to be enrolled in E-Verify, and that is one of the biggest things, they must pay you the salary of that type of job in that type of company. So essentially, it's an internship, but they have to pay you the fair market value of that. So in the 12-month period, there's no guidance on what you should be paid, whether you should be paid. You don't have to be paid. But the 24-month period comes with a lot of restrictions. The third thing is, on the OPT 24 months, is the employer has to complete a form I-9H3. And preparation is everything. Preparation meets opportunity, makes you look lucky. Go and find that form, I-983, I believe. If you Google it, it should come up. That is the form the employer has to complete, not you, the employer. And the employer has to work closely with the DSO to make sure everybody's happy. And then you file for your employment authorization card. Okay. These 983 will basically say what you're going to be learning, how they're going to assess you. So that's the OPT. One of the things I'm going to throw out there that it didn't occur to me to mention to you, but I will. And I'm going to talk about that just before the H-1B, because I have a lot to say about the H-1B. When you're coming off the 24-month period and you haven't won the H-1B lottery, what the interim things that you might want to just put on your list of visas to think about is the J1 visa and the H3 visa. The H3 visa is a training visa. It's essentially an internship. It can be in any subject matter. Nobody cares about STEM necessarily. It's really hands-on experiential learning in any industry. There are many pros and cons of the H3, particularly if you already have an OPT. Because the OPT's goal is to train you with hands-on training that you otherwise wouldn't have. And so if you're trying to get an H3 in that same job, the government will say, well, you've already got 3 years of experience. We don't think you need that. And so the H3 is not an ideal visa in this situation, but I throw it out there for you. Because after the 12-month period, if you decide, you know what, I want to be a lawyer after all, and it's completely left field from what you're doing, maybe the H3 could be something to think about. But if you come across any of your other friends who are only on the 12-month OPT program, it could be something to consider. It's essentially training. And the J visa, again, if you've had the OPT, nobody really wants to give you the J or the H, but the J visa is also a training program. You might know that there are a lot of medicine, your medical residency, recipients who are training to be doctors. Often they will use the J visa program. I've worked recently with a lot of teachers who have been on the J visa program. So keep these on your, list of visas to keep as backups if the H-1B, you do not win that, okay? So now I'm going to talk about the H-1B visa. The H-1B visa is the natural progression from visa to visa to visa. And it is the most popular work visa in America. You need to have a degree and a job that matches the degree. And the government gives out 85,000 visas a year, which is matched with the fiscal year of every year. So the visa starts October 1, any year. And any work visa can be applied 6 months in advance. And so you can apply, and they change the timelines a little bit. The timeline at the moment is about March 20th to March 30th, or March 17th to March 28th. That's what it was this way. You have to get your name in the pool, in the lottery, in that window, and the government will select it between that, March 29th and April 1. And the computer does a random selection and it picks out names. What we saw last year is that the government received 500,000 applications, almost. Think about 85,000 visas. And it's not just the people that are graduating with you, it's the people who graduated the year before you and the year before you because they didn't get selected. This year, which was just a couple of months ago, last month, time is a blur, 6 weeks ago, the government did their H-1B lottery, and we just learned a week and a half ago that the government received almost 800,000 applications. It was 780,000 applications that they received. Now, what does that mean? It means that you have 1 in 10 chances of being selected. I don't do math, you guys do. There's a very slim chance of being selected from here on. And so you have to be aware of all the options in front of you. And that is partly why I'm writing this book as well. And I'll talk about, Samiksha, please remind me to talk about the book, because I think it's very important for this particular group. I just don't want to forget. So the H-1B, what does it mean? How do you apply? The employer has to apply for you. So it's not your application, it's a company's application. You are the beneficiary of the application. The Any work visa will have 3 headings: employer, employment, employee. Every work visa will start with, what is this job? What is the job description? What do you need to do this job? That is where we begin. And the H-1B will be that too. Now, in communications, you might be a marketing strategist. That might be your job description. The question becomes, does the government want to see a degree for this job? There are some jobs that must have a degree. Some jobs don't really need a degree. And the Department of Labor has a library of jobs in which it will say, we believe you need a degree, we believe you maybe don't need a degree. So our starting point is a job description, and then we will be looking at what are the government jobs and all of the alternative titles to see which could be the right one. So that's the employment. And the employee, they'll look at, do you have that degree to match that job? Now, often in computer jobs, for example, if you have a computer science degree, there are so many different types of jobs that are in the tech world: computer analyst, computer programmer, computer architect. All of these have overlaps, but they're not necessarily the same. Sometimes for business strategists, you could be a business analyst because of all of the things that you're learning here. The Department of Labor might say you need a degree in finance or statistics. And, we have to look at what the government is looking for in their requirements for a degree. So there's a lot of analysis that goes with what is the job and the job title. And then we look at what is the salary of that job. Now, if you're working for a big company here, they're not going to worry about the salary. But if you're working with a small startup, they could be worrying about what the salary is. Now, the Department of Labor has 4 levels of salaries: level 1, 2, 3, 4. Level 1 is people like you coming out of university, not a lot of experience, don't need a lot of you can't supervise other people. But if you're very experienced, then you're level 4. And the job has to require that experience. The salary has to match that. And that's the Department of Labor has level 1, 2, 3, 4, reflecting the responsibilities of the job with the salary. And so the government will look at that. And then, I've already mentioned employees. So employer, employment, employee, that is the anatomy of an H-1B visa if you get selected. Now, that is the anatomy of most work visas, okay? I'm going to talk about, so H-1B, if you have questions, make sure you just keep that in mind, ask me. But that's in the lottery. What I think will happen in the future as we go forward is that there are H-1B employers that are referred to as cap-exempt employers, meaning that these employers are not part of the lottery because they are training, they're doing something that benefits the American workforce. And that is universities, higher education institutions. So there are 4 categories of cap-exempt employers. Higher education institutions. So let's say you come out of this and UW says, oh my gosh, you're so brilliant, please stay with us. They can file an H-1B for you anytime in the year. It could be tomorrow, as long as you have a degree and you've graduated. Okay, and it's any higher education institution. A government research organization, a non-profit research organization. I was just telling somebody recently, I was working with a marine biology research organization that, they were able to apply any time of the year, cap exempt. It's a research organization. The last one is a non-profit that has a relationship with the university. Okay, so let's say there's a medical clinic, they are a non-profit, but they are training students from universities who are becoming healthcare professionals. They have an agreement with the university to say, we're going to take your students and we're going to train them. That relationship allows the non-profit to be a cap-exempt employer. So the 3 headings I mentioned, employer, employee, employment, that remains the same. There's a small subheading with the employer where we're saying this is also a cap-exempt employer, therefore we can apply any time of the year. Okay, so it's very important that you understand that this distinction, because I truly worry about H-1Bs in the near future. And you have to be creative in finding the solution. So one of the things that you could do is find employers maybe now and scope them out, do the 12 months and 24 months in that way, see who could possibly help you. One of the things to mention is the nonprofit. You have to prove that with the tax documentation. The IRS will designate who is a nonprofit and what kind of nonprofit they are. And so just being a nonprofit is not sufficient. You have to be able to show that they are a nonprofit research organization. So that's that. I want to talk about the International Entrepreneur Parole. This is a very new program for startup founders. Now, you guys should know, and I'm very, very grateful to Alex Stonehill. I've known him for a long time. And, when he was at the Seattle Globalist, he allowed me to just talk about this a lot. So the startup visa is a visa that is not, it doesn't exist in the United States. It exists in many other countries at this point. But when I was talking about this, writing about this, not many countries had it. But fast forward 10 years, many countries have a startup visa. Canada took our proposed law, a bill, and made it their own. So Canada is now a premium location for startup founders to go to. In the US, we don't have the startup visa, but we have something very close. It is called the International Entrepreneur Parole. It was created just as President Obama left. The previous administration tried to take it away, but the Biden administration has revived it. So the program is alive and kicking. What do you need? It is designed with people like you in mind, actually, because what happens is when you come out of your program, you graduate, a lot of people go into, there's commotion at UW, there's Foster Business School at UW. Often people get into cohorts of 2 or 3, and they're creating their startups. One of them inevitably is an immigrant, and we need a visa for them to stay. This could be a solution. And one of the things that I ask you to do is, in that timeline, I asked you to create for yourself the 12-month and the 24-month. If you are a startup founder, put that in there as well, because the entrepreneur parole will take at least 14 months to get approved. It's a long road to get there. But if you time it, you could come out of your OPT into your entrepreneur parole. And I would love to be able to help whoever does it. It's so new that not a lot of people have filed this. I just spoke at a Department of Commerce event last week in Washington, D.C., and the officers who created this program, who are adjudicating this program, actually spoke at this event, and they told me that there are about 100 applications that were filed, and maybe a dozen of them were approved. So there's not a lot of data in this type of program, but it is absolutely, I'm a big advocate for it. And I think if you qualify, you should file. Now, who qualifies? The business has to be at least no more than 5 years old. So you can't be more than 5 years old. Or if you received an investment, it can't be more than 5 years ago, 18 months ago. So I have blog posts on it. It's written in my current book that already exists, but it's going to be in my new book as well, all the requirements. But you have to have raised $264,000, let's call it rounded up to 65, from an investor, angel, or venture capital companies, or you have raised $105,000 through research and development grants. Now, all of you are in really great positions to look for the research and development grants, because students often have more access to these than the person who's working all day long at Microsoft, who wants to have their startup but don't have access or know-how to get these research and development grants. So if you're in a cohort of 2 or 3 and you have these research and development grants, that could be the foundation for the entrepreneur parole. And you don't have to wait until you come out of your OPT to get it. You could apply. But the government, if you're getting money from investors, the government wants to know that these investors know what they're doing. So they're referred to as qualified investors that they have a proven track record of how that they have invested in people who've created jobs. The key is that the government wants to know that you have potential for rapid growth, not just growing slowly, but growing to scale. And so there are many other requirements in it, but those are the things that are very important for you to know, because we're going to run out of time. So read the book on that issue. But it's important you know that this option exists, and 3 people can use one company to get the entrepreneur parole. It's not just one person, but 3. It's generally thought that, there's a CTO, CEO, CFO, or whatever, CMO. 3 people can get this, and you have to play a central role. And so I think you should keep this at the top of your list if you are on a student visa, working on your own startup, and you're looking for your ways out, because it takes you away from the H-1B anxiety, and it gives you some time to keep putting your name in the lottery year after year. The entrepreneur parole is initially for 2.5 years, and then you can renew it for another 2.5 years if you meet those requirements. So read about those in my book. It's on the USCIS website as well. The other visas I want you to think about, should you not win the lottery, is if you're from a country that has a treaty with the United States, and the Department of State has a list of these treaties, you could possibly qualify for an E1, E2 visa. Now, let's say you have great business idea, or you're like, what, I've just done my MBA and I'm a great communication specialist. I can do my own marketing. I'm going to test my hand in buying a franchise of McDonald's. You could get an E2 if you're from a country where you're investing in your own business. Okay. And one of the reasons I really love the E2s is the investor has complete control over their lives. You don't have to find an employer. You don't have to beg for them to give you a job. You're not relying on these pay stubs. You have complete control of your destiny. And that's one of the things I really like about the E2, if you qualify. A lot of people, the countries that are not on the list are India, China, Indonesia. Some of these big countries are actually not on the list. And so, it doesn't work for everybody. But if it works for you, you should absolutely try to make the most of it. If you're from Canada or Mexico, you should look at the TN visa. The TN visa, very square peg, square hole, the employer, employment, employee. You must have a degree in that subject matter, and you must have the original degree certificate when you go to the border, because you can go to the border to apply for it. I want to mention in the H-1B context that if you're from Singapore or Chile, they have something called the H-1B1 visa. And that is essentially like an H-1B, employer, employment, employee, with a degree. And those are for those 2 countries. The other one is the E3 visa. If you are from Australia, it's like an H-1B, but it's for Australians. E3 visas are given 2 years at a time, and you can keep renewing it. It's a great opportunity if you don't get the H-1B. Okay, I do think that for all of you on a student visa, you will hit that mark of, I need to get an H-1B and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. So all of these visa options I'm throwing at you, I hope you're writing them down. Make sure you figure out which ones you could qualify for, so that you use that timeline I mentioned to figure out your next strategy. Okay, green cards, I'm not going to touch on them, but what I do see, just one thing I'll mention, is there is something called an EB-5. It is, you invest $1,050,000 in a for-profit business that will promise to create 10 jobs. And what I often see is family members, parents who are concerned about their children's futures will often help invest that finance into this green card program. So it's something to just keep at the back of your mind if you have parents who would want to do that for you. But that is not, the top of the list of this particular conversation. I just want to make sure you have issue spotting for all the things that you need. So that's all I have to share. I could talk immigration all day, but I'd love to be able to have enough time to answer all of your questions.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tamina. That was a lot of important information. So, okay, let me start off with the questions. We have a lot of them. So the first thing is people want to know what is the criteria for an O visa and what kind of organizations can support it and what kind of documentations are needed for it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for asking that question because I didn't cover that in my presentation. The O visa is also known as a genius visa. But do you really need to be a genius? On paper, you need to look like you know what you're doing, and you've been doing that for a long time. So the word is you have sustainable credibility, essentially. The O visa can be applied for by any organization. Okay, so employer, employment, employee. If there's a catchphrase that you take away today is employer, employment, employee. And how you present the case really gets divided by what type of visa it is. So the employer can be anyone. The employment is whatever that job is. But the employee is where the O visa gets, really segmented. So there are two types of O visas. There's O1A and O1B. O1A is for the, business, science. O1B is for the artists. I'm going to stick to the O1A for you. The O1A has 8 requirements. Have you won a national or international award? Have you commanded a high salary? Have people written about you? Have you published articles and scholarly, articles in scholarly magazines? Have you been part of a distinguished organization? I'm forgetting the other 3, but it's also going to be covered in my book, and it's also on the website. But on the 8 requirements, you only need to meet 3 of them. Okay. One of the things that I see, especially with my startup clients who are doing their business in the first 12 months, is in that timeline, what are you doing to prepare your credibility? What is your credibility? And that is where you can start building. You want to be writing, you want to, if you have ideas, you want to get them patented. If you have your own business, there are 2 publicity. Do you need press? Not necessarily. It depends on what you have already. Have you received many awards for your inventions, your work? That could be sufficient. Have you got contracts already that show that you're one of the highest paid? And what does that mean? Highest paid in what? Highest paid compared to other people in that profession. So the government has its own sort of salary. I just told you about the level 1 to 4 salary that the Department of Labor has. You can look at that and say, this is the average salary, because the government will have the median salary. But there are Glassdoor and other types of websites that will talk about what salaries are. And you can say, well, coaches, football coaches in Americas, they on average get 40,000 a year. But look at me, I get 60,000 a year. I command a high salary. Okay. It's all about the case and how you present your case. So international awards, and when it comes to awards, it's about peeling back the layers of an onion. Who else got that award? Who is giving this award? How many awards are given out each year? The way I describe it is, this is a Nobel Prize. Who is giving the Nobel Prize? How many are given? Who are the other people who got it? They want to see the exclusivity of that particular award. Okay. Membership in another organization, professional organization. That's one of the ones I was forgetting. So it's peeling back the layers of showing, oh, you're not just good. These other people who are famous, you're one of them. That's how they're looking at it. When it comes to press, if you do get publicity, it's all about, did you get publicity in a rinky-dink high school magazine that only 3 people read? Or were you in the New York Times that millions of people read? And so it's important to, if you're strategizing press, you want to strategize about these various, high audience media companies, publications. But there's a strategy in how you build your case up. Now, there are a lot of podcasts these days. There's radio. There's all different types. So if you have a startup, for example, and you're shouting from the rooftop saying, I'm the founder. That's your time to have marketing for your business. When you're having marketing for your business, you're also having marketing for yourself. And so you can strategize all of those things. So you need to meet 3 of them, but the goal is not to meet just 3. You want to meet as many as you can. What I describe to people is the OVs are sort of like a dartboard. You're trying to throw darts and you're trying to hit the bullseye. You think you've got 3 in the bullseye, but the government might say, I only believe 1 of these. And so that's why you want to meet as many as you can. Now, recently, the Biden administration broadened the evidence that you can give for O visas, and they particularly want to see STEM graduates. So all of you should look at those new policies that they've created, because they want the talented folks like you. So they have broadened the evidence. See what you already have. Create your own strategy of what you have on the O, because if you do not get selected for the H-1B, so let's say you do have an employer who filed your H-1B, you're in your first year of the 24 months, you've got 1 more year left, you didn't win the H-1B lottery, you've been building up, you could possibly have the O visa then. Okay, so strategy is everything. And what you're doing today is incredibly important, because that timeline you're going to create for yourself is going to be the start of your strategic planning of your immigration journey.
Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, the other question is, can we work more than 40 hours on an OPT? And what is the process for that?
I would strongly recommend you do not work more than 40 hours. You know, the Department of Labor, even when you're doing an H-1B, they're looking at full-time. And full-time is considered 40 hours. The Department of Labor has a fact sheet on what is full-time. Read that. And anything that goes to H-1Bs, I would say I would apply to the OPT as well. I believe that you cannot work, you have to work minimum of 20 hours on OPT, but it doesn't say maximum anywhere, but I would say you be conservative in how you work on these visas so that nobody questions, because what will happen is your pay stub would likely reflect that, and you want the pay stub to match what you're telling the government.
Okay. We have some questions about CPT. So is CPT enough to start a full-time job when we are in college? And what is the criteria for that?
Now, I have to be honest, I have to look at the rules for CPT every time I look at them, because it's not something that is a day-to-day practice for me. I will suggest you go to your DSO for really good coverage on that issue. But what I do know is that sometimes people look at day 1 CPTs, and then there are CPTs that could be in the middle of the year. What I have seen from my practice is that when I'm trying to transition somebody from F1 to H1B, the government will always scrutinize the CPT. So what I will ask you to take away from this particular answer is, do not do more than 12 months. You have to be responsible for your own calculation. You know, before the administration really clamped down on the CPT rules, there were schools that they weren't necessarily worrying about it. And then when the rules came down, suddenly we have clients who have 15 months of OPT, 18 months of OPT, and there's no way of going back and fixing it. So you are the one who has to be responsible for that time, and make sure you save every pay stub for your program. One of the things that was happening, at least from my practical experience, is that the government wanted to see people going to school. And they questioned, how are you doing that? When are you doing that? So I'm afraid I'm not the best person for the CPT in this context to give you what you need to know. But those are the issue spotting items that I can tell you what made me deal with the CPT a lot. So talk to your DSO. And, you know, the source is the best thing. Look at the regulations of CPT and what it says, so that you know firsthand what the regulations say. Okay?
Yep. Okay, thank you. So the next question is, how likely are companies to switch an FT from OPT to a work visa? Is that something that they try to avoid because of the paperwork, or do we have a chance to stay?
That is a very employer specific question. Every employer is different. They have their own policies. It depends on what size of company it is. Some of the larger companies here will often, as a matter of course, file for H-1Bs for their OPT interns. Other companies will not. It is something, because one of the things that you should all understand is applying for an H-1B is a very costly process for the employer. It is also time consuming. The government charges $460 plus $500 plus $1,500 or $750, depending on how big they are. Those are compulsory fees for the government. Every law firm will charge their own fee, and that could be $3,000 to $6,000, depending on which law firm they're going to. Where, off the bat, the employer is now faced with a lot of costs for this case. And so it is not about whether they like you or don't like you or like your work. If they really love you, maybe they would. But they are making their own cost analysis of whether they should do this or not. So it is very much an employer specific question. I think as you're on your 12 months and you're working hard to prove yourself, you need to keep talking to whoever your sponsor is, your managers are, to see if H-1Bs are something they do or do not. And if they tell you they don't, you've got to look for others who would sponsor. Now, let's say they're going to sponsor an O visa. There are similar costs for that too. So whatever the visa is, the employer generally has the burden of carrying that cost. But on the H-1B, it is absolutely compulsory that the employer carries all of the costs.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And also, if we are working for a non-profit and they are not sponsoring our H-1B, can we still continue working and get their support, like for H-1B?
Meaning, can the non-profit sponsor an H-1B?
Yeah, if they are not able to sponsor due to some reasons, maybe financial reasons, is there some other way to get H-1B and have their support?
I want you all to definitely read a chapter in my book called Global Entrepreneur in Residence. There's an article that I wrote. I have a monthly column in something called Above the Law. Write that down, Above the Law. And there is an article I wrote, I think the title was Harnessing Foreign Talent or something. And in that, I mention 2 or 3 programs. And it all starts with Global Entrepreneur in Residence program. This is a nonprofit that basically has a lot of relationships with lots of different universities, and they help sometimes fund, sometimes just help with finding the right matches for H-1Bs that are CAP exempt H-1Bs. But the sponsor always has to be an employer. So if your question is, they're not going to sponsor me, can I continue working with them? What is your work authorization to work with them? If you're coming out of your 24 months, you need permission to work with somebody. You're not going to get a work permission anymore just because you're not an F1 anymore. And so you have to have a visa. So the answer is you have to have a visa. And that's basically what we're going through. What are the visas you can consider? Employer, employment, employee. You must have an employer who sponsors.
Okay. All right. Next question is, how do people get multiple H-1Bs? What is the process for that?
Very good question. So let's say you get selected in the H-1B. And the term is concurrent H-1B, okay? It's like having 2 H-1Bs at the same time. If you are a full-time, you got lucky in the lottery, you have won the lottery. Now you're working at a hospital, big hospital. You've got that full-time H-1B. Now you can work at a startup doing innovative medical technology stuff part-time, H-1B, okay? You can't have 2 full-time H-1Bs. There are not enough hours in the day. It's not realistic. but you can have a full-time and a part-time H-1B. You can have those at the same time. But that is assuming you've got the H-1B already at a big, wherever, and you can have, a concurrent H-1B. I just mentioned to you the non-profit cap exempt H-1B. I told you there are 4 categories of employers. I just mentioned to you Global Entrepreneur in Residence Program. If you have a cap exempt H-1B, and I call it the blue car, you have a blue car. It's a full-time blue car. It can be a part-time blue car, but you have a blue car. Because you have the blue car, you could have a red car, which is an H-1B that would normally be in the lottery, but doesn't have to be in the lottery because you have the blue car. That concurrent H-1B can happen, and it is possible to have that kind of 2 H-1Bs at the same time, but it requires you to have the blue car first. The moment the blue car goes away, the red car goes away. Okay, so that's the cap exempt H-1B, which allows you to have a concurrent H-1B with an employer that would otherwise be under the lottery. Hopefully that is something so critical that not a lot of people know it. I've been working on these issues for a very, very long time. I'm now covering it in my book. But now with the H-1B problems we're seeing for the future, this is something that you need to keep on your list.
Awesome. That was really insightful.
I will say that I have been trying for some of our local universities to be part of this Global Entrepreneur in Residence program. I have not been successful. If you think that this is something that you guys are interested in, help me help you. It's finding the right people, matching them with the right programs and the right leaders. And the few times I've tried to do it, leadership changes and, all sorts of things happen. And there's a lot of bureaucracy that happens. And so it's something that I think universities need to be aware of. And when this book comes out, I would be grateful for you to give it to the right people, highlighting the chapter that they need to read, because it will be eye-opening for people that, we're training, as a country, all of you are so talented. If we can't keep you here, it's our loss. It's Canada's gain, maybe, Australia's gain, maybe, but not ours. And so that's why I think universities need to be aware of it.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Okay, so next questions I'll take from the chat because we don't have a lot of time. So we wanted to know, how long does the H3 visa allow us to stay here?
Great question. So the H3 visa is for a total of 2 years. However, if you complete the entire 2 years, you have to go to your home country and come back after 6 months. So often the strategy is to, let's just do 12 months, let's figure out what we do next, and then get the 12 months so we don't get subject to that 6-month residency rule.
Okay. Okay. How can we check if a company is E-verified?
I believe the company has to tell you. I don't know if it's publicly available. And so I think the employer has to tell you possibly. I'm not 100% sure if it's publicly available.
And where can we find the countries that have a treaty with the US for the E1?
Good question. It's on the Department of State website. And what I do myself, because I don't always have time, is I say Department of State E2 treaty country list. And the treaty country list will come up as your first search item.
Oh, okay. All right. And is it possible to transfer an H-1B from an NGO to an organization that is for profit? And is it easy or is it difficult to obtain?
So let's go back to the blue car, red car analogy. The blue car is your non-profit H-1B. You can go from blue car to blue car. You can do the blue car to the red car as well, concurrently, as long as they're together. But if the blue car goes away, the red car must go in the lottery. So the answer is it's difficult. If you're going to the H-1B, cap exempt H-1B doesn't get you into the lottery. The lottery is something you have to do separately on your own.
Okay. Okay. And do we need to apply for an EAD separately after the OPT has been approved? Also, when it's been approved, but we don't have the employment yet, does it impose any risk on traveling abroad?
First of all, do not travel unless you have your EAD in your hands. Typically, I believe it's allowed, but it can be tricky because they're going to be wanting to see that you have employment. The STEM OPT, you have to apply for an EAD application. And that, I believe, again, your DSO knows all of this because people come to me when that part is done. But my understanding is the DSO will work with your STEM OPT employer to do the Form 983. You will complete all of those, and then you can file for the 765. One of the things that is very important, I tell you, it's from experience with one of my clients recently. The client did everything right. They took the DSO, they did the form, they did everything. The DSO has to check a box on the service program. All of you must be aware of what the service program is or the database. The DSO has to check a box for saying qualified for STEM OPT. And then the applicant, you will apply for the 765. USCIS is looking at the service program database. If that is not updated, they will deny the 765. And that is what happened to my client. And then they were out of time, they're out of status. It was not easy to, I don't think they fixed it. Even if the DSO said, oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't check the box, USCIS is like, too bad, so sad. And so it is very important that you are working very closely with your DSO and you ask the DSO, what are the steps that you have to take? Have you done them?
Okay. Wow. Okay, I'll just take one last question because I don't think we have a lot of time. This is a bit specific, but I think it will be useful. So somebody has asked that they are working currently on OPT with their EAD expiring this year. Her H-1B change of status just got approved. So ISS just approved and processed a travel signature for them. And I-20 also shows the H-1B status, but is she safe to travel and come back with this situation?
The trouble is, and this person should look at their approval notice. The approval notice has an I-94 on it, okay? That I-94 says she can seamlessly seamlessly change into H-1B, okay? She's H-1B. During this time, and I'm a big advocate of don't travel if you don't have to. Because what has happened is this person right now is in cap gap. This period between now and, whoever got that approval, know that even if your EAD expires in, like, say, June, I forget what you said that they expires. When does it expire?
Yeah, I think June.
EAD expires. By virtue of the change of status being approved, they can work between June and September 31st on that same EAD, okay? But the moment they come, in theory, they should be able to come back. In practice, I think there could be a lot of questions because what happens is in October 1, she's H-1B. She's going to be H-1B. And if you, depending on when you come back, you have to have an H-1B stamp on your passport. Consulates around the country, particularly India and China, they're backlogged. A lot of these consulates are backlogged and you may not get that visa on time. And so if you're traveling for your own specific situation, talk to the employer's lawyer who helped you, before you make any decisions. I just caveat, I'm not your lawyer. This is not legal advice to each of you. I should have said that at the beginning. But what is really important for all of you to know is that when you have such questions, whoever has helped you with your particular visa, you need to speak with them. Even lawyers will have sometimes 3 different answers because it could go in one of 3 ways. And which one does that lawyer prefer you to do? And so, but know that, you know, your H-1B change of status has been approved because you haven't left the country. When you come back, you have to have that visa stamp. So I would recommend you do not travel, but if you do need to travel, talk to your lawyer very closely.
Okay, that was super useful. Thank you so much, Tahmina. We've covered almost all the questions, so I guess we're good. This was really insightful information and a lot of important things to cover. And we are so thankful that you took out time to help all of us. Yes, so thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And I'll see you. Thank you so much, Tahmina, once again.
Yeah, I just realized I didn't tell you about the book. I was looking for my little flyer. My book is called Visa. It's a visa guide. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, I've got it blurred. Hang on one second. Let me just make sure you know. It's on pre-order on Amazon already. And can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, there's a QR code on. I'll send this to Samishka. It's basically a visa guide. Even though I'm targeting startups, it's a visa guide for really everybody because the visas are the same. Strategies can be a little different, but the visa guide, everything I just told you, I basically put in my book. And so it's really useful for anybody who's looking to figure out what is my next step. You know, yes, you are going to need a lawyer, but at least you're not going to be confused and anxious. It's a starting point. I would love for you to support the book. Authors need reviews. You know, it's like politicians need votes. If authors don't have reviews, the algorithm doesn't let it go up. And I met you today, but most people don't know me, so the book won't show up. So I'd be so grateful. It's coming out on July 4th. I would love for you to get it, spread the word. If you have questions, you know where I am.
Yeah, I will send out the QR and the link in the chat to everyone after the call. So
thank you.
Yeah, and that looks awesome. I think we are all excited to see your book.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. We're just 3 minutes over time, so we are good. Thank you for your time, Tahmina.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.